Today, we have Adam Schmidt, the Director of Appraisal with Compeer Financial with us. Appraisal and assessed values are oftentimes misconstrued as synonymous terms. However, they are very different, and Adam will explain why and how to interpret each of them. You are listening to the Legacy Leaders Podcast with Cassie Munger and Rachel Borg, powered by Ascent Advisors. Our discussions will focus on all things related to ag business planning, transition and succession planning, estate planning, and everything in between. Planning for change is inevitable, and keeping focus on the priorities and objectives of everyone within the family and business should always be top of mind. Tune in as we hear from special guests, peers, and industry experts to discuss topics we can all relate to. Hello, welcome back, Legacy Leaders listeners. We are still with Adam Schmidt. He's been joining us the past few weeks, talking about a lot of relevant topics as it relates to land and appraisals. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between appraisals versus assessed values. You get your property tax statement each year, and it changes the values from year to year. And Adam's going to talk a little bit about how to look at that differently compared to what an appraised value might be.
Yeah, that's a question. Thanks, Cassie. That's a question we get every so often is, are you an assessor, or what's an assessed value? Is it the same as an appraisal? Sometimes that term is used synonymously out there, but they're actually fairly different. So when you get your property tax statement and you see that assessed value, what I like to, an analogy I like to use is, an assessor is using kind of a shotgun approach. Mm-hmm. They're tasked with valuing all the properties, all the parcels in the county or city or whatever it is every year for tax purposes for the state. And so their process, obviously that's a lot of parcels, mm-hmm. kind of a shotgun approach. They need to value a lot of parcels quickly, and they're not necessarily looking at individual characteristics of each one, whereas an appraisal is more of that rifle approach, mm-hmm. looking at specifically that property and trying to pinpoint the value of that property specifically. So just kind of a difference in approach there. Another thing, when you think about the data that an assessor is using, they're tending to look at, okay, here's all of the transactions, and I'm thinking farmland, all of the sales that they deem are qualified sales, and sort of plugging them into their formula broadly across the county, where an appraiser is probably going to look at maybe the 3 to 5 most similar comps.
Okay, so it's not so comp-based.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it is comp-based, but it's still more broad. It's taking into consideration all the transactions across the county versus targeting specific ones that are maybe most comparable to the farm being appraised. Another thing that, and this is important, so assessors, just like appraisers, they're going back in time, hey, what's happened? However, the way that assessment cycle works, they're taking data from a year to a year and a half ago, and as that rolls through and turns into the valuation that shows up on your tax statement, you tend to see a bit of a lag there. So recently is a good example. When values have been rising, mm-hmm. it takes probably a year to start to see that impact on your assessed value. So there's more lag time, where an appraisal, we're trying to use the most current date or data as of that effective date, and those changes in land values are going to be reflected sooner. Similarly, if land values are dropping, now that hasn't happened too much, but those assessed values would be slower to adjust. I think that's a really key point, especially when land values are changing, is you've got to understand that dynamic. Mm-hmm. Values are rising. If you're kind of looking at assessed value and going, hey, I'm going to use this information, you got to understand how that works a little bit, and there's going to be a little bit of a lag time there.
So what about, because I've seen this too, you make improvements on your home.
Yeah.
And you get your property tax statement, and it's like, man, I thought it was supposed to go up by X amount. How did it stay the same or hardly move? Is that why too? It's kind of still a delay in that too.
Yes, but that's probably a different problem. Okay. And it depends on each county probably has different practices on how they handle it. very difficult for them to look at every single house in the county.
Right, and know what you did with it.
Some people sometimes maybe don't want the county to know what their upgrades in their house
well,
look
and
like as well.
but to that point too, if is it something where you could ask the county to come out and reassess it? So if there are time has gone by and for whatever reason, granted, you pay more in property taxes.
Yeah, if you'd like the value to be higher, so you pay more taxes.
Yeah, so it's catch-22. Yeah. But certainly you could ask them to come out and reassess it. Yeah. If you wanted them to.
Now, if you built a new shed on the property, you're going to have to get a building permit for that. They're going to know a new shed was built on the property. Mm-hmm. They can see it on aerial photos, those sorts of things. But if you were to take that shed and turn it into a shop and the assessor had not been out and seen the inside of that, they may be assessing it as a pole shed versus a finished shop. So, there's dynamics like that. You've got to understand what goes into an assessed value versus an appraisal. And it kind of gets down to the question, okay, are there situations where using an assessed value to make decisions makes sense versus, paying for an appraisal? You can pull up online, you get your tax statement annually, you can see that assessed value for no cost to you. It comes down to what are you using it for? Are you looking for a ballpark number, something free to just kind of get you close? Do you have an agreement between, maybe family members? Hey, we're going to transition or buy this property and we've agreed that we're going to use the assessed value. That's great. Right. Those are situations where you might be able to use that information. Again, just understand where the information is coming from.
Well, and even for us, sometimes as we're gathering documents with our clients and starting our analysis, we may only have a property tax statement. We're kind of piecemealing some of their balance sheets together. So a lot of times that's all we have to work with.
And it's a great place to start, too.
Is there a percentage or a way we can look at that to say, well, appraised value might be at least X percent more than this, or is there not really a...
Well, that's a hard question to answer. Again, it comes down to, is the market moving, in my opinion? If the market's stable, by law, don't quote me on this, the state is required on average to have your property assessed plus or minus 5% of the market value.
Okay.
So technically it should be close, but
that surprises me. I didn't know that.
There's nuances that valuation may not capture. Again, shotgun approach versus rifle, lag and data. So,
because it does seem to be relatively low in most cases.
Yeah, well, and particularly when land is going up, you're going to feel like it's low for sure. It's
no, I think it's a great topic, and we run into it all the time with our clients, and like I said, you probably get the questions quite a bit, so it's nice to kind of clarify how to look at the two differently.
So. It's a great starting point. Understand what goes into it, and definitely understand how you're using it. If you're in a situation that's there's scrutiny or laws or regs regulating it, certainly got to be aware of that. We did have and estates or gifting situation where they individuals wanted to use assessed values to provide documentation to the IRS. The IRS challenged that and came back to them and said, nope, you need an appraisal. So, there's just an example there of you got to understand when it's appropriate and what's going into it to make sure you use it appropriately if you're going to rely on assessed values.
Absolutely. Well, appreciate that. I think it was really helpful information.
Yeah.
Thanks, Adam. We'll talk to you next time.